Alright, so today is the second day of review. This is going to be a little bit of a disjointed review because there's a lot of little random parts that we still need to go over so that you're ready for your test tomorrow. You guys can just have notebook paper out and be writing anything on notebook paper that you need to. You don't have to have these specific worksheets in front of you, okay? So first problem says, Noah's pay is directly proportional. Notice I already underlined that. Directly proportional means it's a direct variation. Direct variations means it's going to be proportional. Proportional means it's a straight line through the origin. It can be written in the y equals kx form. It's just like y equals mx plus b, but there's no plus b at the end because it goes through the origin, so the y-intercept is 0. You don't need to write plus 0 at the end there, okay? So Noah's pay is directly proportional to the number of hours he works as a car mechanic. Remember, when we think through this, y is directly proportional to my x. So we know y, the pay is y, the x is the hours. He gets paid $425.50 for 23 hours of work. Write an equation that relates the number of hours to the amount of pay. So in our equation here, first of all we want to do is find that k value. That's what we're going to plug in for our equation. It's going to be y equals something x. For k, remember we do y over x to find our k value. Y is his pay, so $425.50 over 23 hours. And if you divide that out, what do you get? Hopefully you got $18.50 per hour, so it would be 18.5. So our equation is y equals 18.5x. Each hour is $18.50 to get our total pay. Okay? So as we're going through these, if we plug this in, since this is my x and this is my y, I'm plugging in 20 here. So go ahead, pause the video for a second and fill in the rest of this table. When you are done filling in these four, go ahead and press play. Alright, these are the numbers that you should have in this case when you multiply the hours times $18.50. So those are our numbers here. It says, after completing the table, show the ratios that show whether or not there is a constant of variation, constant of proportionality. Remember, constant of proportionality, that's my k value, that's that y over x. We already know because of our equation that there is a k value, but we're going to pretend we don't already have that equation, that we're just going off of this. So we have to check our y divided by x to see if it was constant each time. So you do your 370 over 20, 462.5 over 25, 555 over 30, 740 over 40. And go ahead and divide all of those out and see if you get the same number on each. So go ahead again, pause the video, check and see if you get the same number. If you do, then there is a constant of proportionality. Hopefully you found that there is one, and you should have already known what it was since, again, we had our k value up there, but every time you divide that out, it's 18.5. or that $18.50 per hour. So that is our k value, our constant of variation, constant of proportionality, that constant unit rate that we get. Okay? Next says, show in the outside columns of the table the numbers that will be given for rate of change. Remember, these are y over x. Rate of change, that's my change in y over change in x. We also call that slope. Okay? So my change in y over change in x, that's how they're changing. That's why these boxes go looking at how it changes each time. So on these, as you're going through, see if you can figure out how did it change from 370 to 620, or 462.5. How did it change from here to here? How did it change from here to here? What about on this side? How did it change? So again, pause the video for a second and then unpause it when you have your answers. Alright, so when you look at it, first time it changed by 92.5, second time 92.5, last time 185. Some of you might look at that and say, okay, well, there's not a constant rate of change because these numbers are different. However, if you think of it as change in y over change in x, so my first time was I changed my y by this amount as my x changed by that amount. The next time, it changed the same way for my y and for my x. The last time it changed by 185 for my y when it changed by 10 for my x. Go ahead and simplify all of those and see if they come out to be the same. If they are, there is a constant rate of change then. Hopefully you found that there is a constant rate of change. It is 18.5. All of those come out to be that when you divide out. Okay? So then it asks, what is the unit rate? Now, I want you to think back. Unit rate, that's still just talking about y over x. That's the same thing as up here. When we did that, when we found our constant of variation, our k value, our unit rate, that's going to be 18.5. When they ask, what is the slope? Slope is the same thing as change in y over change in x. So in that case, it's still 18.5. And either one of them, if we wanted to write it out, we could put dollars per hour and have our labels in them. Slope, we tend to not usually put the labels with it. Rate of unit rate, we tend to. But they come out to be the same thing. And the reason that our y over x is the same thing as change in y over change in x is because it is a direct variation. It's directly proportional. It's y equals kx. When it's in y equals mx plus b form, then we know it is not proportional. It's not going through the origin. And so my y over x is going to be different than my change in y over change in x, okay? Very last thing says describe the graph. Well, we know for our graph that it is proportional, so we know it's going to go through the origin. We know that because it's proportional, it's going to be a straight line. And we know our slope is 18.5. So we know it's going to rise 18.5 and run 1. That's our slope, our rise over run. So we have a pretty good idea just from looking at parts of that table and doing some math with it exactly what our graph is going to look like. Go ahead and look at the next one. It says Quentin's pay as a car salesman is calculated by adding a monthly amount of $1,200 plus $150 for every car that is sold. Write an equation that relates the number of cars sold to the amount of pay. So go ahead, pause the video, write your equation, and unpause when you're done. Hopefully you realize that this is the rate. This is going to be the constant. So it would be y equals 150x plus 1,200. Okay, because it's 150 per car plus that added monthly amount. So as we're going through this then, we're going to work through it kind of the same way as before. So go ahead and first just fill in these 4 numbers. So pause the video, do that, unpause. You should have these numbers in here. And if you did not, the way you should be getting these numbers is that you're just plugging them in for x. So 150 times 8 plus this amount gives you your pay. 150 times 12 plus this amount gives me my pay. Okay? Now I want you to take a second, use the information from the table, and find, is there a constant of proportionality, and then what is the constant of variation? So go ahead and pause and answer just the next two questions. So for this one, you should have found that when you did your y over x, first time we got 300, then 250, then 230, then 210. So there is no constant of variation because these are not coming out to be the same rates each time like they did over here. Each time they divided out to be 1850. So in this case, there isn't one. Okay? The next part says, show in the outside columns of the table the numbers that will give for the rate of change. So again, this time we're talking about how things are changing. So go ahead and do that. Just find those numbers and then unpause the video. So you should have had 4, 3, 5, 600, 450, and 750. And again, even though all of those numbers look different, you still have to test them out. My change in y over change in x, change in y over change in x, change in y over change in x. So go ahead and answer, is there a constant rate of change? And then answer, what is the unit rate? What is the slope? So the next three questions here. Okay? So on this one, you should have looked at that when you divide those out, you end up getting 150 on each one. So there is a constant rate of change. You should have known that because of this right here. Constant rate of change is the same as slope. Y equals mx plus b. This is my slope here. So we were going to have that constant rate of change. We didn't have a constant of variation because there was a number here other than 0. Since there was a 0 on this one, that's why we had that constant of variation. The next part, what is the unit rate? Remember, unit rate is y over x. There wasn't a constant y over x, so none. What is the slope? My change in y over change in x was 150, so my slope is 150. So now think about all of the information we have here and tell me what the graph would look like. So once again, pause the video, see if you can come up with that description, and then unpause. So for this one, first of all, we know that since there is a constant rate of change means it's a straight line. Since it is not proportional, it will not be a straight line through the origin. So it's not going to go through the origin, but it's still a straight line, so it's still linear. If it doesn't go through the origin, we can figure out where it does cross, and we can do that by saying, okay, what if my x is 0? What would my y-intercept be? 150 times 0 is 0, plus 1,200. Remember, b means my y-intercept, so my y-intercept is 1,200. That's where it crosses the y-axis. So it crosses the y-axis at 1,200. We know our slope means it's going to rise 150, run 1, and we know it's linear. Okay? So those are all the things we could tell about the graph from this information. All right, after that, we are going to try some substitution story problems. Okay. So this one says, Lincoln lived in Portugal and Brazil for a total of 14 months in order to learn Portuguese. He learned an average of 130 words per month when he lived in Portugal, and an average of 150 new words per month when he lived in Brazil. In total, he learned 1,920 new words. How long did he live in Portugal, and how long did he live in Brazil? So we're going to do this one with substitution, but first we have to write our two equations. So I want you to be thinking about the two variables that we're talking about are how long he lived in Portugal, so I'm going to use P, and how long he lived in Brazil, so I'm going to use B, and see if you can write these two equations. So go ahead, pause the video, try writing the two equations, and then click play. So for my first equation, it says he lived in Portugal and Brazil a total, so that's 150. I'm sorry it keeps going in and out. Maybe the lighting's just funny in my house here, okay? So a total of 14 months. So that means Portugal plus Brazil equals a total of 14 months. Then for the second one, it says that he learned 130 new words per month in Portugal. Well, this is the amount of months for Portugal, so 130 times each month. Plus he learned 150 for each month in Brazil to get a total of 1,920 new words. So there's my two equations. Next thing you need to do is to figure out how we can substitute in. So that we're all working the same way, let's go ahead and solve. This is the easiest one to solve for because there's no coefficients. Go ahead and solve that first equation for P, and then we can start replacing things in and substituting things in. So go ahead and solve for P. When you solve for P, you'd have to subtract B over on both sides. That would end up giving you P is equal to negative B plus 14. So now we're looking at this equation and this equation. This is still the same as the top one, it's just reorganized. At this point, what we can do is we can take what we know P is equal to and replace P with that amount. So when I write that out, that would be 130 times, instead of P, it's going to be this quantity, negative B plus 14 plus 150B equals 1,920. From there, you have to try to solve for B, so I want you to go ahead and try to solve for that. Pause the video, unpause when you are done. So in this, you have to distribute. I'd get negative 130B plus 1,820. From there, combine my like terms. Subtract over my constant. Divide by my coefficient. And I find that Brazil was 5 months, so he lived in Brazil for 5 months. If he lived in Brazil for 5 months, if I think back to here or go back to the one I rearranged, either way when I solve for P, what plus 5 gives me 14? Well, that would be 9. Negative 5 plus 14, that would be 9. So P would be 9. So that means Lincoln lived in Portugal for 9 months and Brazil for 5 months. On the other side here, this is one more story problem. This one, I'm going to want you to try more on your own since we just kind of did most of that one together. It says, at a local gym you go to, you can either pay $90 for a monthly pass, then pay $4 each time you go to the gym. Or, so this is separating the two options here, or pay $13 for each time you go to the gym. Which of the following choices? Well, I took out the choices, so sorry about that. You don't get to look. You get to write those two equations all on your own. So go ahead and try to pause the video and write your two equations and then unpause. So for the first one, it says that you can pay $4 each time you go plus $90 up front. Or the other thing you can do is you don't have to pay an upfront amount, but you have to pay $13 every time you go. So that's our equation. X is telling me how many times I go, Y is telling me the amount of money it's going to cost. From there, you should be able to try to do all of this and figure out what both X and Y are equal to. So I want you to pause the video, try solving completely, solve for one of the variables, plug it back in, get the other variable, and be able to explain to me what both of them mean. Once you have all of that, then unpause the video and watch it through. Alright, so on this one, I'm going to take this amount for Y and plug it in. This is not the only way to do it. If you really wanted to, you could have taken this amount and plugged it in here for Y. Either way, they're going to come out to be the same thing. So I have 13x is equal to 4x plus 90. Just replace that Y with what we knew it was equal to. From there we have to solve. Again, I'm so sorry it keeps going in and out. I know that has to be very annoying for you. So bear with me here. This is the best I can do in the lighting I got today. Minus 4x minus 4x. So I end up with having 9x is equal to 90. Divide by my 9, and I get x is 10. So that means 10 times going to the gym. Well, if I go to the gym 10 times, how much is it going to cost me? 13 times 10, I would find that it's going to cost me $130 when I go that many times. So that would be my solution for this set of systems of equations. Hopefully that makes sense to you. I believe I looked and there's going to be 2 like this on your tests that are story problems where you have to write your equations, your system of equations first, and then solve. Okay? The last part for review is in your book. So you might want to get out your book here. And this is on page 430. You can always just look at these as well, but if you want your book out, that's fine too. So the first one says, determine whether the relationship is a function. You guys did really well on this on the quiz. You always look to see if the x value is paired with only one y value. Remember, that's your explanation. So go ahead and try number 1, pause the video, unpause when you're ready to go through the answer. So number 1, you should have said, no, it is not a function, and the reason is 4, the domain value of 4 is paired with a range value of 2 and with 1. So each x is not paired with only one y. So it is not a function on that one. Go ahead, pause the video, try number 2. On number 2, you should have realized that it is a function. These would be my domain, my x value. This is my range, and none of them repeat. So each x value is paired with only one y value, so it is a function. Remember, when you're looking at this, if I had something like this, this is still a function. Each x is paired with exactly one y. A y can repeat, an x cannot repeat. Okay, so this one is still a function. It's only not a function if the x value repeats. Something they don't have in there is function notation. So let's say you have f of x is equal to 2x minus 4, and maybe g of x is equal to, let's say, negative x plus 3. So if I ask you to solve for f of negative 1 and g of negative 1, make sure you plug it in. If it's f, you're plugging it into the f function. If it's g, you're plugging it into the g function. Go ahead and pause the video and solve for those. Alright, for this, it's just plugging it in for x on each one. So this would be 2 times negative 1 minus 4. When you solve, that's negative 6. So f of negative 1 is equal to negative 6. Same thing on the next one. You plug it in. Be careful when you are plugging this one in. Negative 1. That's really just a positive 1 then. So g of negative 1 is really equal to 4 on that one. The other thing that it will ask about with functions is if a graph is a function. So let's say you have a graph that looks like this. Tell me if that graph is a function, and maybe you have one that looks like that. Tell me if that graph is a function. Hopefully you determine the first one is a function, the second one is not a function. Remember, the test is called the vertical line test. Is there any point where it is crossing the pen or pencil at more than one point? Not on that one. So yes, that is a function. This one, when I get to here, the very first point, no, but then after that it starts to hit 2 points at once on the pen. So no, that is not a function because it does not pass the vertical line test. What that means is right here, maybe this is x, 1, 1. Well, if I go straight down, that would be x is 1 and maybe y is negative 2. So my x values are repeating, so that's why that would not be a function. That's how the vertical line test is kind of tracing that to see if that x is paired with more than one y. Let's see, the next one I want you to look at is number 11. So I might have to move the camera here a little bit so it can all fit on my stuff here. Okay, so number 11, sorry it's kind of low on here, but number 11 and number 12, go ahead and find your slope. Think about how you find slope of 2 points. So go ahead and pause the video and do that. Alright, so looking at those two, I just wrote them down really quick. So you do your y minus y, so 4 minus 1 over x minus x. Remember to always move in that same order. It's really written as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this is my second point, this is my first point. So 4 minus 1 is 3, 6 minus 0 is 6. I simplify and that's 1/2. The next one, when I look at it, I do negative 1 minus 7 over 5 minus negative 3. This one has negatives in it. Be careful with those negatives. So negative 1 minus negative 7 is negative 8. When I do this one, it's really like add the opposite. That's a positive 8. That simplifies to negative 1 for my slope on that one. Okay. Let's see. The next part I want you to look at is number 14. Number 14. It says the cost of renting a paddle boat varies directly. This is a direct variation. This is proportional. That means it can be written as y equals kx. K is our unit rate. We're doing y over x. Okay? So it says write an equation that relates the number of hours with the cost. Okay? So as you're thinking about this, think about, are we finding cost per hour or hour per cost? Hopefully you can hear the difference between the two and know which one it should be. On this one, you're going to do cost per hour. So my cost per hour, thinking that through, that's 18 over 2, 27, oh, that 7's pretty bad, over 3, 36 over 4, 45 over 5. And when I simplify all those out, what are you getting? Hopefully you're finding each one, every single one is going to be equal to 9. So when you write the equation, it would be y equals 9x. That means when I'm looking at this, my number of hours times 9 gives me my cost. So 2 times 9 is 18, 3 times 9 is 27, and so on. Oop, that's a little bit off the screen there, sorry. The next one says, find the cost of renting a paddle boat for 7 hours. Well, at this point, use this equation that we have. Go ahead and figure that one out. You should be plugging in 7 for x, so 9 times 7, that gives me a y of 63, and we're talking about how much money. So it's $63 to rent for 7 hours. The last one there, number 16, says the temperature for 1 day is shown in the graph. Determine whether the relationship between the temperature and the time is a direct variation. So go ahead again if you need to pause the video and be able to explain why you think it is a direct variation or why not. So hopefully you found on this one, it is not a direct variation because direct variations means it's a straight line through the origin. This one does not go through the origin, so it cannot be a direct variation. So that means there is no constant of variation, there is no unit rate. However, think about whether there is a constant rate of change or not. That's a different question. So go ahead and think about that answer, pause it if you need to. There is a constant rate of change because constant rate of change is talking about a straight line. This is a straight line. This is linear. It's just not linear through the origin. Okay? So there is a slope there. There is a constant rate of change. And we looked at how to find slope and constant rate of change with 2 points. Think about how you do it on a graph. So see if you can find the rate of change or slope on number 16. Hopefully at this point you found it. Remember, slope or rate of change on a graph is rise over run. So when I look at this, my rise, I went up 2. My run, I went over 1. Each time I went up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. Some of you are probably like, up 2? What are you talking about? I went up 1 box. Follow the numbers. Follow the numbers, okay? That might be something they try to trick you on the state test. Make sure you're following the numbers on the graph, not just how many boxes there are. So up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. It has a slope of 2 on that one. Okay, so I think we've hit everything that you're going to see on the test. Whether you'd like to see some more or not, you can kind of go through this on your own. We obviously did not do all of the questions. There's a whole nother page that you can be looking at some practice questions. And I do have the scans of the teacher textbook on Google Classroom for you that has all of the answers. So it doesn't have all of the work written out of how to solve these, but it has all of the answers. So anything that you think you need to be practicing, you can go through and do that to help study. You can email me if you know that you have any questions. Okay, so hopefully that all made sense to you and you're feeling pretty confident for the test.